Once the introductory text dissipates, we fade out the darkness and into a view of the Loud's supposed proto-abode, as I'd like to call it. Not a toy or blade of grass in sight amidst the monolithic structure, resembling the newer version only in shape. The property was almost certainly untouched by anyone's hand, including Mother Nature's. Like an empty coffin, a really expensive coffin. But it wasn't abandoned, just devoid of any life is all. Well, except for one nasally posh-sounding man answering an antique rotary phone blaring from inside the house. Sitting alone, feet up on the dining room table, admiring his lavish domicile phone line in one hand and a newspaper in the other. You've reached Dr. Bateman, sole proprietor of Bateman Healthcare. How can I help you today? The man answered astutely as he grinned as eerily as his thin black hair was greasy. Though that grease didn't carry on to his black gloved fingers or suit amazingly. Ah, Rita, dear, come crawling back to your old man, Bateman chuckled wickedly, glazing over the paper in his hand with glee. The New York Post, Sunday, October 17th, 1930. Unemployment on the rise by 20% globally, and there's no roof in sight. Of course, I'd be glad to take them off your hands for good, just so you could get back on your feet. It's a dog-eat-dog world, sweetie. I of all people should know that. Bateman replied in a hushed tone. All the while, we got a nice view of the dining room's large and imposing bookshelf, and a framed newspaper article obscured by the bookshelf just enough to know it was about some kind of house fire, and a few casualties to go along with it. Yes, I understand. Yes, I'm not just saying that either, Bateman groaned, going stiff at the sound of someone pulling by his house. Call me back later. Oh, and maybe not on the business line next time. Thanks. Bateman hung up abruptly, not even waiting for Rita to finish whatever she was about to say. Regardless, he darted out the dining room and stopped by the front door, peering through its peephole. The look of curiosity plastered on his bulging-eyed face, morphing into that of morbid delight at the sight of his lovely grandkids, presumably. Here already now? Oh-ho, I'd better get ready then too. Hee-hee, ha-ha, ha-ha, ha-ha. Bateman laughed. He didn't even move his mouth, just staring out with his immovable grin. Cutting away to the house's lawn, we finally get to see the proto-Loud, with Lynn being the first one out, standing stoic and proud with the same number 1 sports jersey, bearing the dumbest smile I'd ever seen. However, when she began scanning the place from the tip of the roof down to the creaky hanging sign reading Dr. Bateman's Health Insurance, followed by a phone number underneath. Lori, are you sure this is the place? Lynn inquired unsurely. Yeah, it's huge. I bet Grandpa's got a kickball somewhere around here, Luann interjected, bounding out of the van and by Lynn's side. Yeah, you could get really lost, really easy, Lana uttered meekly, moseying around the front of the van, latching onto Lori's side like a koala. Oh, I wouldn't dare worry about that, not when I'm with my koala bear, Lori coddled as she squeezed Lena with all her might. Tight, too tight, Lena wheezed. Huh? Oh my, Lori gasped, letting Lena free upon noticing her turn red face. They're all better now, Lena just groaned in response. Anyways, yes, Lynn, this is in fact the place, no matter how poor the presentation, but anyways, where are your bags, everyone? Accompanying a cacophony of grunting, Lisa revealed herself, carrying everyone's luggage. Here, everyone, your burdens. As she huffed and puffed, Lisa heaved out before collapsing underneath all the weight, much to everyone's astonishment. Well, What is everyone gawking at? Come on, get your, burdens, Lori instructed, with everyone getting their bags, allowing Lisa to stumble back onto her feet, adjusting her glasses as she dusted herself off. Much appreciated. I was wondering when someone would... Lisa stopped, taking in the domicile in all its estranged glory, especially the ragged business sign. Dr. Bateman, didn't Mother say he was a snake oil salesman? Lisa queried, offending Lori. No, Grandfather isn't some lowly snake oil salesman. He's a doctor, and the man responsible for giving Mother a job amidst all this mess. So be nice, everyone. Anyhow, what are we standing around for? Let's get a move on. Now, that's something I can get behind. Race you to the front door, Lynn, Luann declared, shoving past Lynn amidst her head start, giggling all the way too. Although Lynn wasn't as headstrong about it, yeah, don't wait up or anything. Lynn hummed wistfully as all her sisters brushed past, except for little koala bear Lena standing by Lynn, looking at her longingly. At first, Lynn was confused about what Lena wanted. 'Twas only when Lena raised her arms out beckingly did Lynn finally piece it all together, lifting Lena off of her feet and planting her onto her shoulders. Don't get used to this, yeah? I won't. Promise, Lena promised, the two smiling cheerfully as they met up with their fellow sisters. Inside the house, we see Bateman grooming himself by a mirror in the bathroom, adjusting his black vest and tie and checking the time with a gold-chained pocket watch he pulled out of his vest. Jumping out of his skin at the barrage of doorbell rings assaulting his ears. I'm coming, impatient lot, Bateman murmured to himself as he hurried down out of the bathroom, making sure to grab the ebony cane he left by the sink. Outside, we see Luann impatiently ringing the bell, much to everyone's visible annoyance. You only need to do it once, Luann, Lori pointed out agitatedly. Well, maybe he can't hear it just the one time. He is a grandpa. Have you perhaps considered just standing there and waiting so we don't get yelled at? Lisa urged. Maybe you could try hitting the door instead, Lynn suggested with a sly grin, much to Lisa and Lori's horror and Lena's entertainment. Oh no, Luann, don't you dare think about doing... Hey, that's a great idea, Lynn. I'll put the bags back in the van, Lisa insisted as Luann readied her fist. But before that could happen, Bateman swung the door wide open, catching Luann's fist mid-swing by the wrist. That's enough, Bateman uttered, his demeanor scaring the loud stiff. Even Luann's cheery demeanor wavered just a smidge. Hi, mister. My name is Mr. Bateman, Dr. Bateman, or just Doctor. Take your pick, Spawn. I know, I saw the sign, sir. Can you give me my hand back, please? Luann reasoned with a desperate smile as she attempted to free herself. But his titanium grip didn't budge, not even a smidge. Eventually, though, he did let go, throwing her hand back to her so hard she nearly fell to the ground, being saved by Lori, luckily. So sorry about Luann. She hasn't had much to do in a good while. You know how rowdy kids can be, Lori smiled, but Bateman didn't seem too impressed. Flattery will get you nowhere. What are your names? I'm Lori, the oldest out of everyone. Lynn, Lisa, and Luann are all the same age and can be quite the handful as you can see, Lori elaborated, gesturing towards them, who both greeted Bateman reluctantly. So I've seen, Bateman remarked. Of course, we also have the always resourceful Lisa. She's top of every class in her school, Lori boasted, gesturing towards Lisa. Thank you, Lori, although that compliment won't mean much when I graduate in a few months, Lisa professed, stepping forward to shake Bateman's hand. Impressive. Very impressive indeed, Bateman admitted in somewhat disbelief. But that thought didn't linger too long as someone riding on Lynn's back caught his wandering eye. And who might this one be? Bateman questioned with a warm smile, pointing his cane at Lena. making Lena scramble off Lynn, cowering behind her valiant shield. "She doesn't like me very much, it seems," Bateman pointed out, tilting his head to find Lena toiling to evade his gaze. "You simply must forgive Lena. She's just, oh, so terribly afraid of meeting new people," Lori answered pitifully. "Oh, that'll fade, my dear. It always does," Bateman chuckled mischievously. "Now, let me show you to your rooms." And that's exactly what he did in the next scene, with Bateman walking them up the stairs into the hallway, which was the exact same layout as the proper show. Lori living in her room, Lisa living in hers, and Luann living in hers, etc., etc. Of course, the main difference here being the absence of the rest of the family and the closet down the hall remaining unoccupied as a result. But after showing them their quarters, Bateman neglected to tell where he slept, something that everyone noticed but didn't dare ask out of fear of setting him off somehow. But they couldn't help wondering, no matter how much Bateman outright demanded them not to ask. From light to dark, night befalls the house of Bateman Estate with text that reads, "One night later." We bear witness to an empty, lifeless, dim stairway, of which the cameraman scales the stairs without missing a step, stopping at the very top, where we could hear gentle yet heavy breathing, and it is not coming from any of the rooms the Louds are sleeping in. The cameraman then scampers against the wall, pressing along slowly but swiftly, all the way to Lena's room, where a gentle yellow light is emitting from underneath. The cameraman then collapses to the ground, peering underneath the door as the cameraman audibly squeezes underneath the crack to get a better look. Skulking, Lori reading a book while sitting by Lena huddled underneath a blanket, accompanied by a yellow lamplight. When they went back upstairs, Grandma and Grandpa were up. "Is everything all right?" asked Grandma. "It is now," said Papa Bear. "Good," said Grandpa. "Let's all have some—" "What?" Lena asked with a cheeky grin. "Milk and cookies." "Come on, Lena dear. Why do you have to make me read everything?" "Well, 'cause I like it better when you do it. Also, can I have milk and cookies?" Lena questioned, making the cameraman slip out of the crack with a sickening cacophony of slurping, darting from left to right for a way out, only to crawl up the wall and onto the ceiling watching the door. All just in time to hear Lori say, "No, Lena. Look, I've given you your bedtime story. I've given you your mini blankets and now it's time for bed, young lady," Lori reinforced. The thought of Lori leaving Lena starting to scare her. But what about the bedtime snack? I can't go to bed without a bedtime snack. Please. "Maybe in the morning," Lori brushed off, kissing Lena on the forehead as she turned out the lamplight. Unaware of Lena's dismay, "Pretty please?" "No, Lena. Good night." "Pretty please with a cherry on top." I won't ask again, promise." "Oh, alright, but only for my little koala bear," Lori relented, venturing outside the room, completely oblivious to the cameraman directly above the doorway as she tiptoed down the stairs. All the while that breathing came back, not that it ever left, no, it just got much, much worse once it saw Lori leave Lena's room unprotected. Oh no. Well, pressing onward, the cameraman just sits there, lingering on the wall like a gigantic cockroach. But unlike a cockroach, the cameraman began to whisper something. I can't take it. I can't take sitting here waiting for a second longer," the cameraman murmured raspily, continuing to breathe their monstrous moist breath as they began scaling down the doorway, making sure to keep on the edge so as not to be spotted, presumably. Slowly but methodically, the cameraman kept to every shadow. All the while, Lena sat petrified and fright, although it at first wasn't a rational fright. But as the cameraman crept under every piece of furniture in the room, Lena felt something go bump underneath her bed. Lena didn't dare move, instead staying right there where the monster couldn't get her, underneath the covers, of course. But unfortunately for her, that was the worst possible thing she could have done, as a long, sickly hand stretched out, pinching a piece of the blanket, gently peeling away every layer of protection Lena had, as the cameraman's eyes silently rose over her bedside, optic nerves and all. Lena screamed to the absolute highest of heavens as the cameraman's hands swung out from underneath the bed, both snatching her and covering her mouth as she kept crying the bloodiest of murders she could while muffled. By now, the cameraman had long since woken up the entire house with his commotion. So the creature clambered out of the room as fast as possible, only to be cornered by the still half-asleep Lynn, Luann, and Lisa. All they knew was that something really big and scary just kidnapped Lena, whose face was absolutely drenched in frightful tears. Unfortunately for them though, the cameraman was much too swift to stick around, leaping from the top steps down to the very bottom in one swift movement, the other three sisters quickly trailing behind. The cameraman dashed through the sitting room, colliding with the beyond flabbergasted Lori, sending her flying into the edge of the dining table, smashing the table's leg in two from force. "Lori!" the remaining sisters cried, rushing to Lori's aid, all while the creature made its escape behind the dining room bookshelf, disappearing. "Are you alright?" How many fingers am I holding up?" Luann cried, forgetting to raise any fingers as she kept shaking Lori to wake up. "Never mind her, Lena needs us right now. Now show me where that thing went so I can pummel it into the ground." "I believe it went this way," Lisa informed, pointing toward the pitch-black abyss that laid beyond the bookshelf. "Great, now let's go," Lynn began, readying to plunge herself headfirst into the abyss, only for it to stop her. "Lynn, wait!" Lori hollered in fright as she caught Lynn by the ankle, tripping her over. "Ow! What gives? Look, I admire your courage, sis, but you can't just rush in there. You'll be eaten alive, and then what?" Lori explained, making her sag in woe. I don't know." "Exactly. Now does anyone have any ideas? Lisa, Luann?" "Well, a light source of some kind would be a good start," Lisa suggested. "Like a flashlight?" Lynn added. "Why, yes, that would be perfect, provided you can find one, of course." "I'll go scrounge around for one. It's gotta be in someone's bag," Lynn declared, dashing off and up the stairs. "I'll try to do something too," Lisa added. "Yeah, and find a weapon or something too," Luann also added, humming to herself in thought, scanning the dining room and its many features. "Is someone gonna help me? My back feels much too raw," Lori ached. "Oh, my apologies. Take it easy for now though, will you?" Lisa apologized as she helped Lori up, throwing her arm around Lisa, revealing to Luann the broken table leg Lori made. "Thank you, Lisa. I find I can always count on you in times of trouble. Any luck in there, Luann?" "I'm thinking," Luann revealed, visibly shocking Lori and Lisa. "Luann? Thinking? As if tonight couldn't get any stranger," Lisa admitted. "Do you mind? I said I was thinking, didn't I? Geez," Luann chastised, stopping the bickering right in its tracks as Luann continued thinking, darting her eyes from the broken table leg to the kitchen and then back at the two impatient sisters in front of her, until just like that it all clicked in her head. Well, a good amount anyway. Moseying over to the broken leg, she picked it up, looking around for something, which conveniently was the very moment Lynn came back. "Sorry everyone, no flashlights, no lamps, no candles, nothing," Lynn informed tiresomely, pausing at everyone staring at her, especially Luann. "What? It's not that big of a deal, right?" Luann walked right up to Lynn, broken leg in hand, before raising her hand out. "Give me your singlet," Luann commanded, much to Lynn's confusion. Right now?" "No, I want it next leap year." "Yes, right now." All right, it's my sweat you're dealing with though," Lynn disclaimed, reaching underneath her shirt and pulling out a beyond drenched undershirt, handing it over to Luann, who wrapped it around the top of the broken leg before running off into the kitchen, shoving Lori and Lisa out of the way. "Ouch!" Lori bellowed. "Watch it, Luann, I've got a patient here." Sorry, Lori, but I need to do this, Luann dismissed, swinging her gaze left to right, landing on a hot plate seated by the kitchen sink. Bingo, Luann murmured with a smirk, rushing off toward the hot plate, turning it all the way to maximum heat, placing Lynn's singlet on top of the hot plate's plate, resulting in a beyond abhorrent stench flooding the room as Lori, Lisa, and Lynn all came into the kitchen, with Lori and Lisa covering their noses and gagging on the sizzling sweat vapors, much to Lynn's slight offense, taking a sniff of the air herself only to reel from it too. But the gagging soon stopped as all of a sudden the sweaty rag blazed asunder, much to Luann's pride. Raising the makeshift torch high and mightily, "I've made fire, ah ha ha ha," Luann crackled. "Well, how about that? Way to go, sis," Lynn congratulated. "My thoughts exactly, although was it necessary to use Lynn's sweaty singlet? Yes it was. Now let's get some goddamn answers." "Smashing now, let's," Lori howled, clasping onto Lisa, who was able to carry the weight, luckily, sitting Lori carefully onto a nearby dining chair. "I think it's best if you stay here, Lori, where it's safe," Lisa insisted. "What? But oh pooey. Suppose I just slow everyone down, Lori concluded glumly. "I'm afraid so," Lisa reassured just as glumly. "Hey, don't worry about it. We'll be back with Lena in a pinch, right, Lynn?" "For sure," Lynn reassured, all of this making Lori crack a weak smile. "All right then, Godspeed, everyone," Lori cheered, her hopeful demeanor vanishing as soon as everyone left. If God would be so willing anyway, if only Mother was here, she'd know what to do. And so, the remaining sisters journeyed toward the Maw of the Abyss. Luann showed the way down, revealing it to be a secret and winding passage, or to be more specific, a deep and dark winding stairwell, making Luann's stomach churn the longer she stared, ignoring the fact a monster could pop out at any moment's notice. Hello, Luann whimpered, her voice carrying on the stairway all the way down. "What's the holdup? It's just stairs," Lynn interrogated impatiently. "I'd hate to rush you, Luann, but, what is the holdup?" Lisa added. "Well, you go first, Lynn here," Luann insisted, shoving the torch into Lynn's face before quickly scooting towards the very, very end of the line. Lynn just shrugged her shoulders, taking the plunge into the murky, winding abyss. An abyss that they thought would never end. A thought that weighed heavier as time marched, unflinching, making the trio's minds wander through bleaker and unbearable, horrible temptations of what could possibly be at the end. But none of that compared to the sudden realization that crossed Luann's mind. "Hey, Lisa, do you remember what Lori said about Bateman? About him being missing in action?" "Of course I remember. Why, I'd say the thoughts never left." "Yeah, unlike Mr. Bateman," Lynn scoffed, her words taking the air right out of Lynn and Lisa's chest, as if a demon walked right past them. "Luann, sis, surely you don't mean that." "Oh, don't be stupid. Who else could it be? But that's not all. It's not?" Lisa stammered through her trembling breath. "No," Luann paused, averting her face to the wall, bracing herself for what was next. What I mean is, he is a grandpa. Our grandpa, and therefore Mom's dad, so... "We know, just spit it out," Lynn pressed anxiously. "Well, that's just it. What if she's in on all of this? What if she's a monster too? Just biding her time or something? I don't know. I don't." "Luann," Lisa cried, darting her eyes around as she toiled for the right words. I mean, for if that were true, why would she send us away?" Lisa answered with Lynn nodding anxiously in response. "Yeah, see? Worrying for nothing." "Well, I wouldn't say that, Lynn, but for now, let's just move on, shall we?" "I thought you'd never ask," Lynn replied in false bravado, doing her best to fill the freshly dug hole Luann Epiphany made. Pressuring forward, she could see flecks of light and the noise from below growing louder. Lynn's brow furrowed, determination filling the hole Luann's fears dug, making Lynn speed down the hallway. Soon enough, they reached the end of the passage, an age-lumbering birchwood door, emitting a stickly amber light, shone through its iron-barred window, and through it, the noise from before became much clearer than before. "Help! Help me! Please!" Lena's voice rang out, simultaneously relieving the trio and terrifying them. But regardless of their fears, they knew what they needed to do. None more so than Lynn at that moment. Lynn giving her torch over to Luann as she readied to bust through the door, expecting to make their heroic entrance and save Lena once and for all. And yes, Lena was there sitting alone on an unmade king-sized bed, but she was still crying profusely, her head buried into the palms of her hands, with a lantern responsible for the glow emanating outside the door, hanging above Lena by a meat hook, one of many, very sharp meat hooks, hanging all around the room around the trio's shoulder height. After absorbing the ambience, the trio approached Lena, sitting around her on the bed, everyone doing their part to comfort Lena, with Lynn and Lena cuddling her affectionately as Lisa watched from afar, unable to join whilst holding the torch. "Shh, it's okay, Lynn's here, we're all here for you, and we're gonna get you out of here, alright?" Lynn promised as she cooed. "Yeah, and we'll get yummy ice cream," Luann also promised. But Lena just pushed them both away forcefully, furling up into a little ball of misery. "It isn't seeing us here a good thing?" Lisa inquired. "No," Lena sniveled, shocking the trio, especially Luann. But why? Don't you want to go?" And, here, Lena," Luann offered her a handkerchief, to which Lena slapped it out of Luann's hand furiously. "Of course I want to go. I hate it here. But now we're stuck here because Mom hates us," Lena revealed, deeply concerning the trio, especially Lynn, when recalling Luann's fears about her. Who told you that?" "I did," Bateman boomed, closing the wooden door the trio entered. Stepping out of the dark corner he hid in, revealing his freakish self. He stood just as tall as ever, only completely naked, his disgusting black hairs littering his chest and legs serving as the only means of coverage, right down to his gangrene toes and curly yellow toenails. But they didn't grow on the rest of his scrawny skeletal body but his arms. Not his neck, just his chest, legs, and whatever else was left upon his rigid skull, housing his extended eyes, snaking and slithering in the air. "Oh my, what a lovely get-together we have here," Bateman greeted, grinning a gruesome grin and wriggling his six-fingered hands eagerly. Stay back. "Back, I say," Lisa commanded as she waved the torch in his face, all the while instinctually backing further and further away alongside her fellow sisters, making Bateman chuckle darkly. "Or what? Please. If anything, I'm doing your mother a favor, you know," Bateman began, making Lisa pause. "A favor?" "Yes, a favor. Ever since Lori came, I knew your mother would get greedy, and that I would have to deal with her consequences." "Consequences? We're not consequences," Lisa detested. "Yeah, she raised Lori just fine like the rest of us," Lynn added ferociously. And she loves us all very much. Yeah," Luann also added, though a bit reluctantly. At first, but once all her money dried up, she didn't know what to do with you lot, so on she goes, crawling back to me. Do you see what I'm getting at here?" Bateman further elaborated as he drew closer, his revelation shocking Lynn and Lisa to their soft, supple cores. That's preposterous. She wouldn't do that, never," Lisa denied, backing further and further away, with Bateman drawing ever nearer, gating them into a corner. "Oh, come on. Do I have to spell out now? You're all tumors and I'm a doctor, and your mother wanted an operation to have her financial tumors removed. Do you miserable wretched rats understand?" "Give me the torch, Lisa," Lynn whispered, to which Lisa obligated, as Bateman pressed onward to wrap up in himself to notice the sudden exchange. "I could prove it too. I could prove it to you all, that your mother left you to die. No, Lena could tell everyone, can't you, little tasty koala bear?" Bateman cackled, making Lena begin to break down all over again, making Bateman chortle in glee, laying the final straw on Lynn's back as she raised her torch. Tell you what, little wretch, if you can admit to everyone what was said over the phone, I might just whack. Lynn struck Bateman right across the face with the torch, bursting both his extended eyes, sending Bateman swinging around the room, clutching his now burning optic nerves in agony as he cascaded around the room. Burning blood splattered the room as he toiled to hide the pain, only to be caught by several meat hooks. The chains wrapped around his arms and chest, locking him in place as he felt the fire spread from his exposed nerves to all across his face. Bateman roared in bestial primal agony, all the while ripping himself apart as he kept fruitlessly toiling to break out of his meat hook bindings. All the while, the group just watched, except for Liana, who had her eyes covered by Liana, smitten by the spectacle of it all as Bateman writhed, watching the fire completely engulf his skinless head, and then eventually the rest of his hair, pale body, spittles of both burning and fresh blood splattering all over the room. Lynn searched for the torch responsible, picking it up and turning it back to Bateman's burning screams. Her brows narrowed, hatred brimming from her every fiber, hatred so potent it made everyone turn to look at Lynn instead and what she was gonna do next. Only for Lisa to grab Lynn's arm, her fiery gaze snapping to Lisa, averting the torch away from Bateman's writhing body. Leave him, his demons are much better at that than you, Lynn, Lisa reasoned, making Lynn pause in thought. But one look back at Bateman's hideous form told her everything. But we never truly know what she does, with the scene cutting away as Bateman writhing agony echoed into the next shot. The same shot from the very beginning, in fact, only of course Lori was where Bateman sat, waiting anxiously, tapping her hand on the table repeatedly to stave off the worry, but it didn't really seem to do much. Fortunately for her, many pairs of footsteps were heard approaching, a warm yellow light getting brighter and brighter, much like Lori's ever-growing smile, expecting to see all her fresh-faced sisters bright and jolly again, just like when they first arrived, but no. Hauling themselves out of the abyss came Lynn, Luann, Lisa, and Lena in that order. What happened? Lori sputtered, frightened by the display. Bateman happened, Lynn answered bitterly, taking a seat at the table, opposite to Lori, bearing the same door expression her other sisters wore. Oh, Lori uttered, quickly piecing it all together from there. So that thing was Bateman? Lori mumbled, with the sisters nodding lazily in response, making Lori's frown deepen. Did Mother know about this? Who'd you think made the call? Luann asked bitterly, Lori's eyes widening in shock, only for the shock to wane back to the same fearful frown as everyone else. We can never go back home. Ever, Lena spat, filling the room with deafening silence right afterward. So what do we do? Lisa uttered, pitifully so, leaving Lori's mouth agape for an answer. All that would come out were fearful, dreadful, heart-aching breaths. The final few words spoken came after the final shot, the same shot the short began on, only accompanied by nothing but screaming silence. I don't know. Alright, so now it's time for the review portion of this creepypasta. So I want to go ahead and start off with saying I like the introduction. It was a good way to introduce us into the creepypasta with a pretty good background story of how this lost episode was even found. He tells us about a man who used to work at Nickelodeon who had his Loud House idea stolen by the guy who actually created the show in real life. Yes, a lot of people are going to say that this is the most generic issue with creepypastas, is that they all start off like this, and they go into the story talking about blood and gore, and then it ends with the episode somehow being lost, and it will never be found again. This is a little different, though, as with this, as you could tell from part 1 and part 2, from this episode series, there is a lot of detail in the introduction, which is a lot of people neglect to do, trying to get into the story as fast as possible. With DJ actually giving a full background that made the story enjoyable for me right off the start of it, I love the introduction. So the introduction by itself, definitely a 10 out of 10. Now, if we go back to the story, I did actually enjoy this story. It was very long. It was very enjoyable for being long. Like, it kept me entertained throughout the whole reading of it. Okay, so I liked how all the characters were talking to each other. I like how the communication was going. I like how there wasn't very much cussing. Like, he didn't make the characters cuss a lot. There was not a whole bunch of like blood and gore talk. Like, he didn't do like the typical cliche stuff for creepypastas. He actually made the story his own story, and he put a lot of effort into the story, and I could tell that when I read it by how long it is and how much detail he puts in the story. Like, DJ put a bunch of detail in this story, like a lot of detail. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. So story-wise, it's definitely a 10 out of 10. Story-wise, it's definitely a 10 out of 10. There are some grammar issues in here that I tried to fix myself during the recording. Some of them I may have missed, some of them I may not have. But outside of that, his grammar was mostly good. There was just a few tiny mistakes here and there. There wasn't like a whole lot of mistakes, just a few tiny ones here and there. So grammar wise, I'll give him like an 8 out of 10. And for keeping me entertained this whole time, he came up with his own monster. Like, he didn't use some like generic monster. He had the doctor turn into like this monster looking thing, which you'll see a picture of when I upload this. It'll be in there. He's got a picture of it drawn. So he made his own monster, and that's actually pretty cool too. I actually enjoy that. He did not do any cliche things in this. So overall, the creepypasta, I would definitely give it a 9 out of 10. And if you haven't read it yourself, I would definitely recommend that you go read it yourself. Now, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you guys have, drop a like, hit that subscribe button down below with the notification bell on to be notified every time I upload a video. Leave a comment in the comment section down below telling me what other creepypastas you would like to see, what murder mysteries you'd like to see me cover, any type of videos you'd like to see. And also, follow me on Twitter. Follow my Snapchat, because my Snapchat's always popping. And also, follow me on nothing else. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.